The gunshot echoed across the empty plains of Wyoming Territory as Beau Farrell lowered his smoking Colt, watching the final outlaw crumple to the dust. The year was 1878, and as he holstered his weapon with mechanical precision, Beau felt nothing, not satisfaction, not relief, not even the familiar rush that once accompanied victory. The bounty would keep him fed, but food had lost its taste 3 years ago on that blood-soaked day in Sweetwater. "Another one for the undertaker," Marshal Wilson said, approaching on horseback. "That's 4 this month, Farrell. The territory's running out of wanted men thanks to you." Beau nodded silently, his weathered face betraying no emotion as he collected proof of his kill. At 32, his eyes held the vacant stare of a man twice his age, deep blue pools that had witnessed too much death. His tall frame remained imposing, but something vital had gone missing inside him, leaving only a hollow shell that performed the motions of living. "Payments waiting at my office," the marshal continued, undeterred by Beau's silence. "Though I reckon you might consider taking some time away from the hunting. Man needs more than blood money to sustain him. Man needs nothing but air and purpose," Beau replied, his voice a rough whisper from disuse. He mounted his dun stallion with fluid grace, the product of a lifetime in the saddle. "I'll collect what's owed." The ride to Redemption Creek took less than an hour, the small settlement appearing on the horizon like a mirage in the late afternoon sun. It had grown in recent months. A new hotel stood beside the saloon, and a proper doctor's office had replaced the barber's side business of stitching wounds. Beau noticed these changes with detachment, the way a dead man might observe a world that continued without him. He tied his horse outside the marshal's office, ignoring the sideways glances from townsfolk who knew his reputation. The legend of the soulless shooter, they called him a man who killed without remorse or hesitation, who walked through gunfire as if death itself had rejected him. They weren't entirely wrong. Marshal Wilson counted out the bounty, $70 for a man whose name Beau had already forgotten. "Town's having a social tomorrow night at the new hotel," the lawman mentioned, "celebrating the arrival of some new settlers. Might do you good to remember what civilized company feels like." Beau pocketed the money without response. Civilization had nothing to offer him anymore. As he stepped back onto the boardwalk, a commotion erupted down the street. A team of horses pulling an overloaded wagon had spooked, charging wildly through town with a woman desperately clutching the reins. Without thought, Beau sprinted forward, calculating the trajectory with the cold precision that had kept him alive through countless gunfights. He leapt as the wagon passed, landing with jarring force beside the woman. His hands closed over hers on the reins, and together they fought the panicked animals. For a breathless moment, disaster seemed inevitable until Beau managed to turn the team in a wide circle, gradually slowing their momentum until they stood trembling in the middle of the street. Only then did he look at the woman beside him. Her face was flushed with fear and exertion, eyes the color of summer sage wide with residual terror. A strand of auburn hair had escaped from beneath her bonnet, catching the light like copper wire. "Thank you," she gasped, her breathing ragged. "I thought I was finished." Beau nodded curtly, already preparing to jump down from the wagon. His duty was done. But her hand caught his arm, surprisingly strong for its delicate appearance. "I'm Kate Clayton," she said. "Most call me Kate. I'd like to know the name of the man who saved my life." Something about her directness gave him pause. "Beau Farrell." Recognition flickered across her features. The bounty hunter. He expected the usual fear to follow, but instead, she smiled a genuine expression that reached her eyes. "Well, Mr. Farrell, it seems I owe you a debt." "No debt," he replied, discomfort prickling beneath his skin. He hadn't engaged in real conversation with anyone in months. Horses were spooked. Could have happened to anyone. Nevertheless, She studied him with unsettling intensity. "I've just arrived in town with supplies for my new business. Perhaps you could direct me to where I might find temporary lodging." Against his better judgment, Beau found himself pointing toward the hotel. "New place. Should have rooms." He jumped down from the wagon, landing with the soundless grace of a predator. Before he could walk away, Kate Clayton spoke again. "I hope to see you again, Mr. Farrell. Perhaps at the social tomorrow night." Beau didn't respond, already moving toward his horse. He needed whiskey and solitude, not conversation with a woman whose smile had momentarily impossibly made him feel something stir in the empty cavity where his heart used to be. The saloon provided the former, his rented room above it the latter. As darkness fell, Beau cleaned his gun by lantern light, the ritual as necessary as breathing. Outside his window, Redemption Creek settled into evening rhythms. Piano music drifted from the saloon below, punctuated by occasional laughter and the distant howl of a coyote. Sleep, when it came, brought the same nightmare it always did. Blood on his hands, Sarah's face pale and still, the tiny graves on the windswept hill. Beau woke before dawn, sweat-soaked and reaching for a weapon. The next day passed in the familiar fog that had become his existence. He replenished his ammunition at the general store, avoided conversation, and considered riding out of town. There was word of a cattle rustler with a price on his head near the Montana border. New hunting grounds, new blood money. Yet as evening approached, Beau found himself standing before the small mirror in his room, studying his reflection with critical detachment. The face looking back was a stranger's, bearded, weathered, with eyes like empty wells. He trimmed his beard with mechanical precision, washed the trail dust from his skin, and changed his shirt. He told himself it was only curiosity that drew him toward the hotel as lamplight spilled from its windows and the sounds of a fiddle carried on the evening breeze. Nothing to do with sage green eyes or a smile that had momentarily pierced the numbness. The hotel's dining room had been transformed for the occasion. Tables pushed back to create a dance floor, lanterns casting warm light across freshly polished floors. Beau lingered in the doorway, instantly regretting his decision. Towns like this survived on gossip and hope, two commodities he had no use for. "You came." Kate Clayton appeared beside him, her voice carrying traces of pleasant surprise. She wore a simple dress the color of autumn leaves, her hair arranged in an elegant knot that emphasized the graceful line of her neck. "I wasn't certain you would." "Neither was I," Beau admitted, uncomfortable under her direct gaze. "Well, I'm glad. Would you care for some punch? I made it myself, brought the recipe from Boston." Boston. The word explained her refined manner, the slight accent he couldn't place before. "You're a long way from home, Miss Clayton." "Kate, please." She handed him a cup of reddish liquid that smelled faintly of cinnamon. "And yes, about 2,000 miles, give or take. Though I suppose home is where we make it, isn't it?" The question felt loaded with meaning Beau couldn't decipher. "Some would say." Kate studied him over the rim of her cup. "You don't agree? Don't have opinions on the matter anymore?" Beau replied, surprised by his own honesty. Instead of the awkward silence he expected, Kate nodded thoughtfully. "Fair enough. But you did have opinions once, I'd wager." The conversation veered dangerously close to territories Beau had cordoned off years ago. He changed direction. "What business brings you to Redemption Creek?" Her expression brightened. "Books, Mr. Farrell. I'm opening a bookshop and lending library." The unexpected answer caught him off guard. "Books? In Redemption Creek?" People need stories everywhere, perhaps more so in places where life is hardest. Her conviction was evident in the slight lift of her chin. "I've brought 300 volumes to start, with more to follow once I'm established." "Ambitious." "Necessary," she countered. "Children need education." Adults need escape. Everyone needs to know they're not alone in their experiences. Her eyes held his with uncomfortable perception. Even those who think themselves beyond reaching. Before Beau could formulate a response, Mayor Thompson interrupted, eager to introduce the town's newest entrepreneur to other residents. Kate excused herself with a promise to continue their conversation later, leaving Beau with the distinct impression he'd been assessed by standards he didn't understand. He retreated to a corner, nursing his punch and watching the social unfold around him. Couples danced, children played, townspeople laughed and gossiped. It was a world he once belonged to before Sweetwater, before the empty shell he'd become. Not one for dancing? Kate had returned, slightly flushed from a turn around the floor with the blacksmith's teenage son. Not anymore. Something in his tone must have revealed more than he intended, because her expression softened. We all carry weights, Mr. Farrell, some more visible than others. Beau, he corrected, surprising himself. If I'm to call you Kate. Her smile returned, warming something cold inside him. Beau, then, would you walk me home? I've taken rooms above what will soon be my shop, just down the street. The night air would be welcome after all this commotion. He should refuse. Should return to his room, pack his few belongings, and ride out at first light. Instead, Beau heard himself agree, and minutes later they were walking side by side along Redemption Creek's main street. The night was cool, stars scattered like diamond dust across the vast Wyoming sky. It's beautiful here, Kate said softly. Different from the east, but beautiful in its own right. Beau glanced at her profile, illuminated by moonlight. What really brings a Boston lady to Wyoming Territory? Truth this time. She looked at him sharply, then laughed a genuine sound that made him realize how rare authentic laughter had become in his world. Perceptive. The books are real, as is the shop. But you're right, there's more. She paused before a small storefront with fresh paint. This is me. A lantern hung beside the door, casting enough light for Beau to read the freshly painted sign. Clayton's Books and Lending Library. Below, in smaller letters, opening soon. The more complicated answer, Kate continued, unlocking the door, requires tea. Would you care to come in? I promise it's perfectly respectable. The living quarters are entirely separate upstairs. Beau hesitated. 3 years of isolation had created habits not easily broken. But curiosity, that dangerous, long-dormant emotion, propelled him forward. The shop interior smelled of fresh paint, sawdust, and the unmistakable scent of books. Crates lined the walls, waiting to be unpacked. A large desk sat near the front window, and empty shelves waited to be filled. Kate lit a lamp, illuminating the space. It's not much yet, she said, but it will be. Tea will just take a moment. I keep a kettle upstairs. While she disappeared to her quarters above, Beau examined the nearest crate. The lid had been partially removed, revealing leather-bound volumes packed in straw. He carefully extracted one, The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. The tooled leather cover was smooth beneath his calloused fingers. Have you read it? Kate asked, returning with a tray bearing a teapot and 2 cups. Long time ago, Beau admitted. Story about revenge. And redemption, Kate added, setting the tray on the desk. About a man who thinks he's lost everything, only to discover that the greatest prison was the one he built around himself after his escape. She poured tea into delicate cups that seemed wildly out of place in the half-finished frontier shop. Milk? Sugar? Black is fine. Beau replaced the book carefully. You still haven't answered my question. Kate handed him a cup, then leaned against the desk. No, I haven't. She took a sip of tea, organizing her thoughts. I left Boston because staying meant marrying a man. My father chose a business arrangement disguised as matrimony. I had inheritance money from my mother, enough to start fresh somewhere my father's influence couldn't reach. Why here? Why books? Books were my mother's passion. She believed in their power to change lives. Kate's expression grew distant. As for why here, I needed somewhere that required what I could offer. Somewhere I could build something meaningful. Risky venture for a woman alone. Life is risk, Beau. The question is whether the risk serves something worthwhile. Her eyes found his again with that unsettling directness. What about you? What brings the notorious bounty hunter to Redemption Creek? Or perhaps more accurately, what keeps you moving from town to town, never staying? The question cut too close to truths he never voiced. Beau set down his teacup, suddenly eager to escape. Getting late. Should be going. Kate didn't try to stop him, but her words followed him to the door. The social continues tomorrow evening. Different crowd, more the working folk who couldn't come tonight. I'd welcome your company again, if you're still in town. Beau paused at the threshold. Likely riding out tomorrow. Then I wish you safe travels, she replied without judgment. And should your path lead back this way, my door is open. For conversation or simply a quiet place to read. He nodded stiffly and stepped into the night, unsettled by the encounter. Something about Kate Clayton disturbed the carefully constructed emptiness he'd maintained since Sweetwater. Her questions probed wounds he'd thought cauterized. Her presence awakened sensations he'd believed dead. In his room above the saloon, Beau began packing his saddlebags. The bounty on that Montana rustler would be enough to keep him supplied for months. There was nothing keeping him in Redemption Creek. Yet when morning came, he found himself unpacking those same bags, telling himself it was practicality, the rustler could wait another day. His horse needed rest. The gunsmith had promised to look at his rifle's sight. Lies he barely believed himself. The day passed slowly. Beau avoided the main street, took his meals at the small cafe near the livery rather than risk encountering Kate at the hotel restaurant. By evening, his resolve weakened. Just one more conversation, he told himself. One more glimpse of those intelligent eyes before returning to the solitude that had become his only companion. The second night social had a different character, less formal, more boisterous. A different fiddler played faster tunes, and the dance floor stayed crowded. Beau spotted Kate immediately, helping organize games for the children in one corner. She wore a simpler dress tonight, practical but becoming, her hair in a looser style that suited the occasion. She noticed him almost immediately, excusing herself to cross the room. You stayed, she observed, pleasure evident in her voice. For now, he qualified, uncomfortable with the warmth her smile generated. Well, I'm glad, whatever the duration. Kate gestured toward a table laden with food. Have you eaten? Mrs. Peterson's fried chicken is worth committing minor sins for. The evening unfolded differently than Beau expected. Kate introduced him to townspeople not as the fearsome bounty hunter but simply as Beau Farrell, who had saved her from a wagon accident. They treated him differently as a result, with cautious welcome rather than wary distance. Later, as the celebration wound down, Kate again asked if he would walk her home. This time, the invitation felt weighted with possibility that both attracted and terrified him. When will your shop open? Beau asked as they strolled through the quiet town. 2 weeks if all goes well. The shelves arrive tomorrow, and I'll need time to catalog and arrange the books. She glanced at him. I could use help unpacking crates, if you're looking for honest work that doesn't involve firearms. The offer caught him off guard. Not much good with books. You don't need to be. Just need strong arms and careful hands. Her smile held no judgment. And I pay fair wages, though I can't compete with bounty rates. Beau found himself considering it honest work, peaceful work. Something he hadn't known since before Sweetwater. Might be around, he said finally. Can't promise. That's all anyone can ask. They reached her shop, and Kate unlocked the door. Would you like to come in again? I have coffee this time, not just tea. The invitation hung between them, innocent on its surface but carrying undercurrents Beau wasn't prepared to navigate. Better not, he said gruffly. Early start tomorrow. Kate nodded, accepting his decision without question. Then good night, Beau Farrell. I hope our paths cross again. She hesitated, then stepped closer, rising on tiptoes to press a gentle kiss to his weathered cheek. Thank you for the company. Before he could respond, she slipped inside, the door closing softly behind her. Beau stood frozen, his cheek burning where her lips had touched a sensation so foreign that it took him moments to identify it as simple human warmth. The dawn brought no clarity. Beau went through his morning routine, checking his weapons, tending his horse with mechanical efficiency while his mind circled the same questions. Why stay? Why risk the unfamiliar terrain of human connection when solitude was safe, predictable? Yet at 10 o'clock, he found himself standing outside Clayton's books, watching through the window as Kate directed two men unloading wooden shelving units from a wagon. When she spotted him, her face brightened, and she waved him inside. Perfect timing, she called. These gentlemen need to make another delivery and can't stay to help assemble the shelves. I was about to resign myself to a much longer day. Beau stepped into the shop, nodding at the departing deliverymen. Never built a bookshelf before. Fortunately, these come with instructions, Kate replied, pointing to a sheet of paper covered in diagrams. And I'm reasonably handy with tools myself. My father considered it inappropriate for a lady, which naturally made me determined to learn. The work was straightforward, physical but requiring attention to detail. Kate worked alongside him, her sleeves rolled up, sweat eventually dampening tendrils of hair at her temples. They established an efficient rhythm, communicating with minimal words. By mid-afternoon, empty shelves lined the walls, waiting to be filled. Thank you, Kate said, surveying their work with satisfaction. This would have taken me days alone. She disappeared upstairs, returning with a cloth-wrapped bundle. I brought lunch if you're hungry. Nothing fancy, just bread, cheese, and apples. They ate sitting on crates, the simple meal more satisfying than any Beau had eaten in recent memory. Perhaps it was the honest work, or perhaps the company. Tell me about your life before, Kate said suddenly, breaking a comfortable silence. Before whatever made you believe your soul was gone. Beau stiffened, appetite vanishing. What makes you think? I watch people, Beau. It's a habit from childhood. Her voice remained gentle, but her eyes were knowing. You move like a man who expects nothing from the world because he believes he deserves nothing. Your eyes look at people but don't connect except occasionally, when something breaks through, and you seem almost startled by it. The assessment was too accurate, too penetrating. Beau stood abruptly, reaching for his hat. Shelves are done. Should be going. Kate didn't rise to stop him. Running doesn't change what follows you, Beau. I should know I ran 2,000 miles. Her words halted him at the door. Difference is, whatever you're running from didn't destroy everything you were. Didn't it? The question hung in the air between them. We're not so different, you and I. Just at different stages of the same journey. He turned back, suddenly angry. You know nothing about my journey. I know loss when I see it, she replied steadily. I know what it is to bury your heart so deep you think it's gone forever. She stood, brushing crumbs from her skirt. I also know that hearts have a stubborn way of continuing to beat, even when we wish they wouldn't. The truth of her words struck harder than any physical blow. Beau left without responding, striding quickly down the street toward the saloon. He needed whiskey, needed the familiar numbness to drown out the unwelcome emotions Kate Clayton stirred within him. 3 drinks later, the numbness hadn't arrived. Instead, memories rose like ghosts: Sarah's laugh, the smell of their small cabin, the weight of his infant son in his arms, the pride of honest ranching work, the future that died in flames when the Bellamy gang raided Sweetwater. Beau ordered another whiskey, but the barkeep hesitated. "Maybe ease up, Farrell. Been matching you drink for drink, and I'm the one behind the bar." Irritated, Beau tossed coins on the counter and grabbed the bottle, taking it up to his room. The familiar ritual drink until sleep came. Hope the nightmares stayed at bay offered no comfort tonight. Kate's words echoed. Hearts have a stubborn way of continuing to beat, even when we wish they wouldn't. Morning brought a pounding head and bitter clarity. He needed to leave Redemption Creek. Needed distance from green eyes that saw too much, from a woman whose presence threatened the walls he'd built around his grief. Beau packed methodically, checking his ammunition and supplies. He'd head north, track the rustler, collect the bounty, return to the empty existence that had sustained him for 3 years. As he saddled his horse, Marshal Wilson approached. "Heading out." Beau nodded, tightening the cinch. "Business up north." "Shame. Town's starting to take to you." The lawman leaned against the stable wall. "Clayton woman was asking after you this morning." Seemed concerned. The information shouldn't have affected him, but Beau felt something tighten in his chest. Nothing to be concerned about. Wilson studied him with shrewd eyes. "Known a few men like you, Farrell. Men who survived when others didn't. Carry the weight of it like a physical burden." "Your point?" Beau asked tersely. "No point. Just an observation." The marshal straightened. "Rustler you're after, fellow named Jenkins, killed a family near Cheyenne last week. Mother and 2 children. If you bring him in, make it breathing. Families deserve to see justice done proper." The information settled like lead in Beau's stomach. Another family destroyed, more innocent lives taken. The cycle of violence continuing while he hunted killers without healing anything. "Safe travels, Farrell," Wilson said, turning to leave. "Hope you find what you're looking for out there." Beau mounted his horse, guiding it through Redemption Creek's awakening streets. As he passed Clayton's books, he saw Kate through the window, arranging volumes on the newly assembled shelves. She looked up, catching his eye through the glass. For a moment, they simply looked at one another. Beau on horseback, clearly packed for departure. Kate surrounded by the new life she was building. She didn't wave or call out, just held his gaze with an expression he couldn't decipher before returning to her work. Beau urged his horse forward, leaving Redemption Creek behind. The vast Wyoming landscape opened before him: endless prairie, distant mountains, freedom from complicated emotions. The familiar emptiness welcomed him back. 3 days later, he found Jenkins camped near a creek 50 miles from the Montana border. The rustler was exactly as described: tall, scarred across one cheek, traveling with 2 companions. Beau observed them from a distance, planning his approach with the cold precision that had kept him alive. Night fell. The outlaws drank around their campfire, passing a bottle and laughing. Beau moved silently through the darkness, disabling their horses first to prevent escape. When he stepped into the firelight, Colt drawn, the rustler's reactions were predictable: shock, then desperate reaching for weapons. "Jenkins," Beau stated flatly, "you're wanted for murder. Coming with me to Cheyenne." One of the companions drew first. Beau fired without hesitation, the bullet finding its mark with deadly accuracy. The second man raised his hands immediately, but Jenkins lunged for his rifle. Beau's second shot took him in the shoulder, dropping the rustler to the ground with a howl of pain. As he approached to secure his prisoner, Jenkins spat curses. "Should have killed me outright," the rustler growled. "Because I'm gonna kill you first chance I get." "Heard that before?" Beau replied, binding the man's wrists tightly. from men now feeding worms. As he secured the surviving companion, Beau felt nothing of the satisfaction that once accompanied capturing dangerous men. Just the mechanical completion of a task, the promise of payment. Jenkins had killed a mother and her children destroyed a family as the Bellamy gang had destroyed Beau's, yet bringing him to justice felt hollow. The return journey to Cheyenne took 4 days, Jenkins complaining constantly about his wound. Beau treated it enough to prevent infection but showed no sympathy. The surviving companion proved more agreeable, perhaps hoping for leniency. At Cheyenne, the sheriff took custody of both men. "Fine work, Farrell. Bounties $200 for Jenkins, $50 for Davis here. Family of the victims wanted to thank you personal." "Not necessary," Beau said, uncomfortable with the notion. "Just doing a job. They're staying at the hotel. Husband survived because he was in town when the attack happened. Lost everything: wife, kids, home." The sheriff counted out bills. "Least you could do is let him shake your hand." The request felt like a trap, but Beau reluctantly agreed. An hour later, he stood awkwardly in the hotel lobby as a hollow-eyed man approached mid-30s, once robust but now gaunt with grief. "Mr. Farrell," the man said, extending his hand. "Thomas Reynolds. I wanted to thank you for bringing in the men who killed my family." Beau shook the offered hand, finding no words adequate for the situation. "Sheriff says you tracked them over 50 miles, Reynolds continued. "Says you're the best bounty hunter in the territory." "Just doing my job," Beau managed. Reynolds studied him with the penetrating gaze of a fellow sufferer. "Does it help?" he asked suddenly. "The hunting, does it fill the hole they leave behind?" The question struck too close to truths Beau never acknowledged. He looked at Reynolds and saw himself 3 years ago, broken, empty, desperate for something to fill the void. "No," he admitted finally. "It doesn't." Reynolds nodded, as if confirming something he already suspected. "What does, then? How do you keep breathing when your reason to live is gone?" Beau had no answer. He'd been asking himself the same question for 3 years, filling his days with violence and his nights with whiskey to avoid confronting it directly. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Haven't figured that part out yet." The admission hung between them, raw and truthful. Reynolds' eyes filled with tears. "I'm afraid," he whispered. "Afraid of what I'll become without them." Something shifted in Beau's chest: recognition, empathy, emotions he'd thought long dead. "I was afraid too," he found himself saying. "Still am most days." They talked for an hour in the hotel lobby, 2 broken men sharing the unspeakable burden of surviving when loved ones didn't. When they parted, Reynolds clasped Beau's shoulder. "Thank you," he said simply. "Not just for Jenkins. For the truth." That night, in a rented room above Cheyenne's busiest saloon, Beau lay awake, Reynolds' questions echoing in his mind. The bounty money sat untouched on the bedside table, blood money that bought ammunition and whiskey but never peace. With sudden clarity, Beau realized he couldn't continue this way. 3 years of hunting men hadn't filled the void left by Sarah and their son. It had only widened it, allowing him to fall deeper into numbness. Kate's words returned to him. Hearts have a stubborn way of continuing to beat. Was it possible his wasn't as dead as he'd believed? The way his pulse quickened when she smiled, the warmth that spread through him at her touch, these weren't the responses of a man without feeling. Dawn found him already riding, but not north toward more bounties. Instead, Beau headed west, back toward Redemption Creek and a bookshop where possibility waited. The journey took 3 days, pushing his horse harder than was wise. When the town appeared on the horizon, Beau felt something unfamiliar: anticipation, perhaps even hope. Emotions he'd thought buried with his family in Sweetwater. Redemption Creek had changed subtly in his absence. A new sign hung outside the general store, and construction had begun on what appeared to be a schoolhouse. Beau rode directly to Clayton's books, dismounting with uncharacteristic haste. The shop window displayed neatly arranged volumes, a small sign declaring open hanging on the door. When he entered, a bell chimed softly, announcing his arrival. Kate looked up from behind the desk, surprise giving way to guarded pleasure. "You came back," she said simply. "Didn't plan to," Beau admitted. He removed his hat, suddenly conscious of trail dust and the stubble on his jaw. "Found myself heading this way regardless." She set aside the ledger she'd been writing in. "Why?" The directness of her question demanded equal honesty. "Something you said, about hearts continuing to beat." Kate's expression softened. She came around the desk, stopping a few feet from him. "And does yours?" "Seems to." Beau struggled to find words for emotions long suppressed. "Beats harder when you're near." The admission hung between them, vulnerable and true. Kate's eyes searched his, finding whatever confirmation she needed. "I have a business proposition," she said, surprising him with the change in direction. "The shop needs regular deliveries to outlying homesteads and ranches. Books ordered, books returned. Requires someone trustworthy, capable in the wilderness." Beau frowned slightly. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a purpose," Kate corrected. "One that builds rather than destroys. Brings stories to people who need them, rather than taking lives from those who've chosen wrong paths." She stepped closer. "It doesn't pay what bounty hunting does, but it might help answer the question you've been avoiding." "What question is that?" "How to keep living when your reason is gone." Her gaze held his steadily. "By finding new reasons, day by day. By allowing your heart to beat for something else. Someone else, when you're ready." The proposition struck Beau with unexpected force. A life delivering books instead of death. Regular returns to Redemption Creek, to this shop, to Kate. Not redemption. Exactly nothing could redeem the blood on his hands, but perhaps a step towards something better than emptiness. "Need time to think," he said finally. Kate nodded. "Of course. The offer stands whenever you're ready." She returned to her desk, resuming her work as if giving him space to retreat if needed. But Beau didn't retreat. Instead, he found himself asking, "Need help with anything today?" She looked up, a smile spreading slowly across her face. "As a matter of fact, I do. These shelves won't organize themselves." Over the following weeks, Beau found himself spending more time at Clayton's books than anywhere else in Redemption Creek. He helped Kate organize her inventory, built additional shelves as business increased, and eventually accompanied her on her first delivery run to outlying homesteads. The welcome they received at isolated cabins and small ranches surprised him. Children ran to meet them, eager for new adventures bound between leather covers. Adults requested specific titles or authors, often pressing coffee and meals upon them in exchange for news from town. "See," Kate said as they rode away from a particularly remote homestead where a weathered woman had wept at receiving a copy of Shakespeare's sonnets. "Books aren't just luxuries. They're necessities out here, connections to wider worlds." Beau nodded, understanding growing within him. Each delivery felt meaningful in ways bounty hunting never had. Each return to town, to Kate's smile of greeting, anchored him more firmly to the present rather than the haunted past. Marshall Wilson found him one evening as Beau repaired the bookshop's back door. "Word travels," the lawman said conversationally. "Folks saying the famous bounty hunter's trading his gun for books." "Not trading it," Beau replied, testing the repaired hinge. "Just using it less." Wilson nodded. "Had a telegram about Jenkins. Hanged last week in Cheyenne." He studied Beau's face. "Feel anything about that?" Beau considered the question honestly. Relief that he can't hurt anyone else. Otherwise, not much. Different from before, Wilson observed. Time was. You'd have moved on to the next bounty without a backward glance. The observation was accurate. Something had changed, was still changing within Beau. The numbness receded gradually, allowing other emotions to surface. Satisfaction in work well done, pleasure in Kate's company, even occasional moments of peace. Clayton woman's good for you, Wilson continued. Whole town sees it. Question is, do you? Before Beau could formulate a response, Kate appeared in the doorway. Beau? Oh, Marshal Wilson, good evening. I was just about to ask if either of you gentlemen would care for some coffee. I've just made a fresh pot. The evening passed pleasantly, Wilson sharing news of the territory, while Kate discussed her plans for expanding the lending library's reach. Beau contributed little to the conversation but found himself content to listen, to observe Kate's animated expressions, to exist in a moment uncomplicated by violence or revenge. Later, after Wilson departed, Beau helped Kate close the shop for the night. They worked in comfortable silence, moving around each other with the ease of growing familiarity. I'm leaving tomorrow, Kate said suddenly, surprising him. Just for a week. There's a book auction in Denver I need to attend. The news shouldn't have affected him so strongly, but Beau felt immediate resistance to the idea. Denver's dangerous for a woman traveling alone. Kate raised an eyebrow. I crossed the continent alone, Beau. I believe I can manage Denver. Different kind of dangers, he insisted. Train robberies increasing. Reports of bandits near the southern route. She studied him, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Are you offering to accompany me, Mr. Farrell? The question hung between them, loaded with implications. Traveling together would mean sharing accommodations, negotiating public perception, crossing boundaries Beau had carefully maintained. If you'd welcome the company, he said finally. Kate's smile broadened. I would. Very much. The journey to Denver marked a turning point. Away from Redemption Creek, they were simply Beau and Kate, not the notorious bounty hunter and the respectable bookshop owner. In the anonymity of train travel, conversation flowed more easily. Kate shared stories of her Boston childhood, her domineering father, her dreams of education denied because of her gender. In return, Beau found himself speaking of Sweetwater, of meeting Sarah when they were barely 20, of building their small ranch together, of the joy and terror of becoming a father. He spoke haltingly, and used to giving voice to memories so long suppressed. But Kate listened without judgment or pity, offering instead the simple gift of witness to his grief. Denver itself provided new experiences. Kate navigated the book auction with impressive expertise, securing volumes for prices that made more established dealers scowl with envy. Beau watched her in her element, confident, knowledgeable, occasionally ruthless in her bidding strategies, and felt something expand in his chest that might have been pride. Their hotel rooms adjoined, a propriety that nevertheless allowed for long conversations that stretched into the night. On their final evening in Denver, seated in the hotel's restaurant, Kate reached across the table to touch Beau's hand. Thank you for coming with me, she said softly. It's meant more than I can express. Beau turned his hand beneath hers, their palms meeting, fingers intertwining. The simple contact sent warmth through him, not the heat of desire, though that existed too, but something deeper. Connection. Belonging. Kate, he began, uncertain how to express the transformation occurring within him. These past weeks, she squeezed his hand gently. I know. Me too. They returned to Redemption Creek, changed not dramatically in ways others might notice, but fundamentally in their relation to each other. Beau moved his few possessions from the room above the saloon to the small apartment behind Kate's shop. Tongues wagged briefly until Marshal Wilson pointedly mentioned at Sunday service that Mr. Farrell was providing security for the valuable book inventory. In truth, their arrangement remained proper if unconventional. Separate sleeping quarters, shared meals, long evenings of conversation or comfortable silence. Kate reading aloud from her favorite books while Beau repaired furniture or cleaned his gun's domestic routines that gradually healed wounds he'd thought permanent. On a crisp autumn evening 6 months after his return to Redemption Creek, Beau rode out to the hill overlooking town. The aspens had turned golden, shimmering in the late afternoon light. He dismounted, allowing his horse to graze while he gazed at the settlement below. From this distance, Redemption Creek looked peaceful, smoke rising from chimneys. The new schoolhouse completed, Kate's bookshop distinctive with its bright blue door, a community growing, thriving, creating something sustainable from the harsh wilderness. Beau reached into his pocket, withdrawing the small object he'd been carrying for weeks. A ring's simple silver band set with a single emerald that reminded him of Kate's eyes. He'd purchased it in Denver while she was occupied at the auction, hiding it away until he found the courage to offer it. A twig snapped behind him. Beau turned sharply, hand instinctively moving to his gun. Old habits died hard but relaxed immediately upon seeing Kate approaching on her bay mare. "Marshal Wilson said you'd ridden this direction," she explained, dismounting gracefully. "I thought I might join you." She looked beautiful in the golden light, her hair loose around her shoulders, cheeks flushed from the ride. Beau felt the now familiar quickening of his pulse at her presence, the undeniable evidence that his heart continued beating despite everything. "Wanted to think," he said, gesturing toward the view. Kate stood beside him, following his gaze to the town below. "It's lovely from up here. Almost peaceful enough to make you forget the Hendersons are feuding with the Daltons again over that boundary line." Beau smiled slightly, another change, these small expressions that came more naturally now. "Town's lucky to have you," he said, "bringing civilization one book at a time." "Books don't create civilization," Kate replied thoughtfully. "People do when they choose connection over isolation, building over destruction." She turned to face him. "People like you, Beau." He shook his head. "Not me. Too much blood on these hands." "The past doesn't vanish," Kate acknowledged. "But it doesn't have to define the future either." She reached for his hand, the one still clutching the ring in his pocket. "What's this?" The moment arrived before he was prepared. Beau considered deflection but found himself withdrawing the ring, holding it between them as the setting sun cast everything in amber light. "Been carrying this," he admitted. "Waiting for the right moment." Kate's eyes widened, her gaze moving from the ring to his face. "Beau, not good with words," he continued, forcing himself to maintain eye contact despite the vulnerability of the moment. "But I know this. Thought my soul died in Sweetwater with Sarah and our boy. Thought nothing remained but an empty shell seeking vengeance." He took a breath, gathering courage. "You proved me wrong. Showed me my heart still beats, still feels, still hopes." His hand trembled slightly. "Don't deserve a second chance. But if you're willing—" Kate silenced him with a finger against his lips. "Never speak of deserving," she said fiercely. "Love isn't earned or deserved. It simply is." Tears gathered in her eyes. "And yes, Beau Farrell. Yes, I will marry you." She removed her finger from his lips, replacing it with her mouth in a kiss that contained all the words neither of them quite knew how to say. When they separated, Beau slipped the ring onto her finger with hands steadier than he'd expected. "Not traditional," he felt compelled to point out. I mean, damaged goods." Kate laughed, the sound carrying across the hillside. "Traditional is vastly overrated, and we're all damaged in our own ways." She looked at the ring on her finger, then back at him. "Besides, I prefer to think of it as experienced. You've lived enough for 2 lifetimes already." "Planning on a quieter third," Beau replied, drawing her close again. They were married 2 weeks later in Redemption Creek's small church, Marshal Wilson standing as Beau's witness, the schoolteacher as Kate's. The town turned out in surprising numbers homesteaders they delivered books to, shopkeepers who'd watched their unusual courtship unfold, children who'd come to adore Miss Kate, and respect the quiet man who now helped run her shop. Their life together evolved with the seasons. The bookshop thrived, expanding to include a small printing press for the local newspaper. Beau's skills found new applications not just in security and deliveries, but in teaching young men responsible gun handling, in tracking lost children or livestock, in occasionally assisting the marshal when trouble arose. The nightmares never completely vanished, but they came less frequently. On the bad nights, Kate would hold him, her presence anchoring him to the present rather than the blood-soaked past. On her difficult days, when memories of Boston and her father's cruelty surfaced, Beau provided steady, unwavering support. A year after their wedding, Kate placed Beau's hand on her stomach, smiling at his confusion until understanding dawned. The mixture of joy and terror that followed tested his newfound emotional capacity, but Kate's confidence never wavered. "This child will know love from both parents," she promised. And stories, so many stories. Their daughter arrived in spring, red-faced and loud, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that eventually settled into a shade between Beau's blue and Kate's green. They named her Hope not subtly, perhaps, but truthfully. She represented everything they'd found in each other. Second chances, new beginnings, futures previously unimagined. As Hope grew, so did Redemption Creek. The railroad arrived, bringing increased commerce and population. The bookshop expanded again, adding a second story with a proper apartment for the growing family. Beau's occasional bounty hunting became exclusively local, tracking lost children or wandering elderly residents, never again pursuing killers across state lines. On Hope's 5th birthday, as friends and neighbors gathered to celebrate, Beau found himself watching his wife and daughter from across their garden. Kate was helping Hope show off her new ability to read simple sentences, both of them laughing at the child's dramatic recitation. Marshal Wilson, now gray-haired but still sharp-eyed, appeared beside him. "Never would have predicted this," the lawman said, nodding toward the domestic scene. "Not for the man I met that first day, hunting Bellamy's gang with death in his eyes." Beau nodded acknowledgement. "Wouldn't have believed it possible myself. She did that. It wasn't a question. Brought you back to life." "Started it," Beau corrected. "I had to choose to stay living." He watched as Hope abandoned her reading to chase a butterfly, Kate following more sedately. "Every day, still choose it." "Worth it?" Wilson asked. Beau didn't hesitate. "Every moment." Later that night, with Hope finally asleep after the excitement of her celebration, Beau and Kate sat on their small porch overlooking Redemption Creek's main street. Stars scattered across the Wyoming sky, the same stars that had witnessed Beau's solitary wandering years before. "Penny for your thoughts," Kate said, her head resting against his shoulder. Beau considered the question, sorting through the complex emotions that he'd once believed himself incapable of experiencing again. "Thinking about souls," he finally answered. Kate waited, giving him space to continue in his own time, a gift she'd always offered. "Thought mine was gone," he continued, "burned away with the ranch in Sweetwater, dead and buried with Sarah and our boy." His arm tightened around Kate's shoulders. "Was wrong. Wasn't gone. Just dormant. Waiting. For what?" Kate asked softly, though perhaps she already knew. "For someone stubborn enough to keep knocking until I answered." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "For you." Kate turned in his embrace, her face illuminated by lamplight from inside their home. At 35, she was more beautiful to him than the day they'd met, her features now familiar territory, mapped by years of shared experiences. "I knew from the first moment," she admitted, "when you saved me from that runaway wagon. I saw it in your eyes, not emptiness, but pain so deep it masqueraded as nothingness." Her hand found his, fingers intertwining in the gesture that had become their silent communication of connection. I recognized it because I carried my own version. Never thanked you properly, Beau said. For not giving up. For seeing something worth saving when I couldn't. Kate smiled the smile that had first cracked the armor around his heart. That's what love does, Beau. It sees the truth beneath the scars. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of Redemption Creek, distant piano music from the saloon, the occasional laughter of passers-by, the soft breathing of their daughter through the open window. A life neither had imagined possible when fate first brought them together. Happy? Beau asked, the question simpler than it once would have been. Kate's answer came without hesitation. Completely. As the stars continued their ancient passage overhead, Beau Farrell, once the notorious bounty hunter, now bookseller, husband, father, acknowledged the truth he'd fought for so long. His soul hadn't died in Sweetwater with his first family. It had merely waited, dormant but intact, for the chance to live again. And in the years that followed, as Hope grew into a young woman with her mother's intelligence and her father's quiet strength, as the bookshop became a cornerstone of the community, as Redemption Creek transformed from frontier settlement to proper town, Beau never again doubted the beating of his heart. For Kate had proven not only that it continued to beat, but that it was capable of loving more deeply the second time around, enriched rather than diminished by the grief that had preceded it. The legend of the soulless shooter faded into frontier mythology, replaced in Redemption Creek by stories of the bookshop owner and his scholarly wife, whose passion for literature brought enlightenment to the Wyoming wilderness. If newcomers occasionally recognized Beau from wanted posters long outdated, they soon learned to see him as the town now did not defined by his past, but by the life he'd chosen to build from its ashes. And on quiet evenings, when memories of Sweetwater surfaced, Beau no longer drowned them in whiskey or buried them beneath violence. Instead, he acknowledged them as part of his journey, the devastating loss that had eventually, improbably, led him to Redemption Creek, to Kate, to Hope, to the second chance he'd never sought but had found nonetheless. His soul, once believed lost, now thrived in the love of family and community, proof that even in the harshest wilderness, renewal awaits those brave enough to risk their hearts again.